Now it's time for us to look at the 6.6 section one more time, but this time we're going to do it a little differently. Normally, we would just solve the equations by factoring and going on. In Chapter 11, however, it introduces the quadratic formula. And what I have found is that the numbers in Chapter 11 are very, very ugly as far as answers go. So I want you to have a little bit of experience with the quadratic formula before you get to Chapter 11 so that you have a little more confidence in your ability to work these problems. Now, you remember that a quadratic equation is one that starts out as ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Remember that it always must equal 0. The quadratic equation says to solve for x in this equation, I am going to be looking at the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, one of the reasons I put the b in parentheses is because I want you to remember that when you square this b, you're always going to get a positive number right here. This one won't always be positive, but that first part under the radical needs to be positive when you square it. Okay, let's look at a problem. Before we start, I'm going to go ahead and put the quadratic formula back at the top of the page so that we can remember what it is. And it is helpful if you write this formula down every time you use the quadratic formula. That way, you'll have it memorized by the time you do a few. If my first equation that I want to look at is something like x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0, then what I am going to put in here for a is 1. That's the number sitting in front of my x squared. Remember, if I don't see a number in front of the x squared, it's 1. B is negative 6, and C is 9. So now I'm just going to take these numbers and put them into the quadratic equation so that I get the opposite of negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9. All of this over 2 times 1. That's positive 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 36 over 2. I squared 6 squared to get the first 36, and negative 4 times 1 times 9 gave me the second one. So I get 6 plus or minus 0 over 2, which gives me x equals 6 over 2, which is 3, and x equals 6 over 2, which is 3. So my one and only answer to this guy is 3. Let's do another one. I've got one that looks like this. And let's put the quadratic back on the top of the page again. The opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I want to look at x squared equal 3x minus 2. Now I can't work this equation as it is because it's not set equal to 0. I need to start by subtracting the 3x and then adding the 2. So on this side of the equation, I get x squared minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. Now my a is 1, my b is negative 3, and my c is 2. Plugging that into the quadratic formula, x will be equal to the opposite of negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2 all over 2 times 1. That is, the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3, plus or minus the square root of 9 minus, so I've got negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times 2 is 8, all over 2. So I get x equal 3 plus or minus 1 over 2. I need more paper, so there we go. I had x plus, x equal 3 plus or minus 1 over 2. That means I have x equal 3 plus 1 over 2 and x equal 3 minus 1 over 2. Now 3 plus 1 is 4 over 2 is 2. And 3 minus 1 is 2 over 2 is 1. So my answers here are 2 and 1. One last problem. I have 16. Okay, hang on. Let's put our quadratic formula here. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And my problem is 16x to the third minus 12x squared minus 18x equals 0. The problem I have here is this is not a quadratic equation. This is a cubic equation. To make it a quadratic equation, I need to factor out one of the x's along with any numbers they have in common. Since we've been looking for the greatest common factor, it should be no surprise that a 2 and an x factors out of this, giving me 8x squared minus 6x minus 9 equals 0. Now, I'm going to go ahead and set my first factor equal to 0 and solve. And so one of my answers is x equals 0, and I need to keep up with that because I've got a cubic, so I am expecting 3 answers. The other 2 will come from the quadratic formula, and it will come from that piece right there. In this case, A is 8, B is negative 6, and C is negative 9. Putting this into the quadratic formula, that gives me the opposite of negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 9 all over 2 times 8. So x is equal to positive 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 4 times 8 times negative 9, which is negative 36 times 8. which gives me negative 288. Because I had two negatives, I'm going to wind up with positive 288 divided by 16, and x is going to be 6 plus or minus the square root of 324 over 16. So I have x equal 6 plus or minus the square root of 324 over 16. Now, taking the square root of 324, I get 18. So I have 6 plus or minus 18 over 16. So x is equal to 6 plus 18 over 16, and x equals 6 minus 18 over 16. Now x will equal 24 over 16, which can be reduced to 8 will go out of both of those. 8 goes into 16 two times. Over here, I get negative 12 over 16, which gives me a 4 will go out of both of those, so 3 and 4. So my two answers are 3/2 and negative 3/4. Oops, but it was a cube, so I'm expecting 3 answers. Let's not forget the one that we had earlier from up there. So there's my 3 answers. All right. I hope this helped explain what you were supposed to be doing on these pages. Now you're to go to the book and do page 461, problems number 24, 28, 32, 40, 47, and 48 using the quadratic formula that I just showed you. Thank you.